Welcome everybody to my living room and to my online Zoom meeting with my brother, Tony Bryant. I want to introduce you guys to him. Tony is my older brother. I know you can't tell. I know with all my gray, I actually look like the older sibling, but he is the older brother. He's a good brother. Tony is the husband of Lucy. They've been married for 29 years this year. He is a father of 8 children. And if I do my math right, Tony, you have 11 grandchildren. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a father and to be a grandfather of all of those kiddos right now, and like, how are you feeling? How are you dealing with the stress?
Yeah. At this point right now in my life, pretty good. I've got a really, for the first time in a lot of years, a good relationship with the Lord. And that's really brought a lot of peace, and no fear, other than a healthy fear. We have to be careful and take care of ourselves. But for a lot of years, it wasn't like that. As Joe said, been married 29 years. Coming up in June, it'll be 29 years, and wound up having 2 daughters back to back, then a son, my only son, and then 6 more daughters over the course of all those years. And my youngest now is 11, and then she just said, grandchildren. We inherited 5 grandchildren overnight when my oldest daughter got married, and had the rest since then. Hard to keep up with the birthdays, but for a long time, I definitely stress and fear and every other thing, every human emotion that you can imagine, was present, and it wasn't working. And, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So about a year or so ago, I realized, even though we survived as a family, it wasn't always healthy. I didn't always manage stress well. There was certain things that would set me off. A child talking disrespectful to Lucy, or disrespectful to me, or to each other. And those were my triggers that, even though I consider myself a pretty good dad, there were things that I definitely didn't handle well. And so over the last year, I finally realized, I have to manage those expectations and not have too big of expectations. We're only responsible for ourselves, our own actions. We truly cannot control other people's actions. So when I finally realized and gave up that control that I wanted to have, you know, and then did a lot more praying, a lot more loving, a lot more forgiving and asking for forgiveness, not trying to be perfect, and admitting to others around me, my family and loved ones, that, hey, I'm not, I'm asking certain things of you, I expect certain things, but I'm going to fall short. You're going to fall short. We're all going to fall short, so, but realizing that, we can't live in a state of being anxious, and worrying and try to micromanage every aspect of our lives. So anyway, the last year has been pretty good, because it comes down to love and showing grace and love.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons for the folks that are viewing this, which seems like a very private conversation between a brother and a sister, is our cousin Pam reached out to me a couple weeks back, and her heart is just broken because she's realizing that with the social distancing and the isolation, that there are a lot more cases of child abuse. There are a lot more cases of domestic violence. There's just all kinds of things that are going on in families because of the stress of these times. And those things aren't necessarily making the news. And so I knew that my brother, God love him, the daddy of 7 girls and 1 boy, knew a thing or two about being stuck in a house with a bunch of people that he didn't necessarily get along with every day, but loved very much. And so, that was really the reason that I asked him to have this conversation with me, and why I wanted to record it, and why I wanted to share it with you guys. Because I have seen the difference in my brother. I mean, he talks about over the last year, and I'm going to get him to tell you in a little bit what that difference has been over the last year, and where this change has come from. But, tell our viewers tonight, Tony, what advice do you give men who do struggle with all the burden of being the dad, of being the primary breadwinner? Because you were that for a good long time, as Lucy homeschooled, and you worked, and you came home, and you still had all the responsibilities of being a dad. What words of encouragement do you have for our viewers?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest thing that I've learned that's given myself encouragement is to truly live in the moment. The past is a great, we can learn from the past. Mistakes, past, all the past. We can learn, we're supposed to learn from the past, but we can't live in the past because we can't change it. And we can't truly, and we're not in the future yet. We can change our future, we can change the future, but the only way we can do that is by living in the present. Where change takes place is in the present. So I would say to be present with your children, when you're in the room with your children, we can't always do it, but be present. Let them know that you're hearing what they're saying, that you're in that moment, because it's really easy. It's really easy in today to let your family become background noise, because we have so much on our minds. We have to live in the present. If we live in the present, that truly, it takes away worrying about tomorrow. It takes away dwelling on the past, because we can't do anything about that. What the future is going to be determined by the moment that we're in right now. So that's probably one of the biggest words of encouragement. I said, you got to love your family without expectation, offer forgiveness and forgive and ask for forgiveness when we mess up. It's countless times I have to go back to my children and say, hey, Dad, I am sorry for this morning. I overreacted, and there's power in that. There's power when your children, your family knows you're real, and I said, fear, what president was it that said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself?
Yeah. Very wise words.
Yes. And so I said, it's natural to be it's natural to have concerns, but I would call them concerns. We have to do what is prudent, due diligence, but we can't let that fear is a liar, like a popular song, one of my favorite songs. But besides being a liar, it's a very powerful tool. It can cause all kinds of wreak havoc in your life, in your emotional, your physical life, spiritual life. So not to walk in fear, and that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
But that's it. But I would say, to be present, not to give in to fear and worry. Don't be anxious about tomorrow. Just live in the present.
Absolutely. So you with me previously, and I want you to talk a little bit about how there's a specific ministry that you have gotten involved with that has really helped you get to this point. So you have been part of Celebrate Recovery, and for our audience, maybe some people have heard about Celebrate Recovery and just automatically assume that's for heroin addicts, or that's for alcoholics, or that's for people that have some like almost court-ordered reason for being involved in that program. But that's absolutely not the case for you, Tony. So tell us a little bit about your experience with Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, it's not that at all. It's very similar to AA or NA, but it was started, I believe, in the 90s, and hopefully we can put some links up. But back in the 90s, by Rick Warren and John Baker, I believe, out in Saddleback Church in California. And it's they like the AA program, those programs like that, but they weren't Christ centers they should be, and they saw a lot of relapse, a lot higher relapse rate than should have been. So when they looked at it and sat down, and the saying for CR, it's about hurts, habits, and hangups. We all have hurts. We all have hurts, and even if we think we don't, we're probably in denial. So we all have hurts. Hangups can be, losing our temper too easy. Uh, we all have weird hangups in life, and habits. So it's hurts, habits, and hangups. And of course, hangups. That's where you get the drug addiction. For me, it was nicotine addiction. Uh, as a man, was never proud to admit it, but I dealt with lust, and then that's not just, women deal with lust too, from what, I didn't realize until I got involved in CR but what CR is we start off, it's almost like church once a week, and it's just a group of believers. Some of them are believers, some aren't, but they accept you as there are. I believe there's 30,000 plus locations around the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, I could be way off of my numbers.
Yeah, that's okay.
It might be 300,000, but I think it's 30,000. Yeah, but how it is, the first time I went because I would lose my temper easy, because like I talked about earlier of injustices. It didn't take long for somebody, one of my older daughters, to criticize a younger daughter, for me to say, don't talk to her like that, or to interject myself into that sibling dynamic, which I shouldn't have. But my wife, Lucy, brought to my attention, it's like, hey, you need counseling. You need something, maybe. You need to talk to a pastor, because it wasn't often. It wasn't a daily basis that I lost my temper. But when I did, I did. And because I'm quiet natured, when I did yell, everybody noticed, So even though it might be 3-4 times a year, it was like, oh boy, dad's really upset, and so she encouraged me, like I said, and I had other habits and hangups too. So I went to a meeting, and it started off like at a church, and it was just like praise and worship. I'm looking around, probably 40 or 50 people, and they were all people from all walks of life. Some were there, same issues as me. Some dealt with codependency, or depression, eating disorders. We had some there that were prostitutes trying to get out of prostitution. Some were drug dealers that had turned their life around and was looking someplace to break that cycle. A lot of people just hurting, and then there was some that were, addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, some into witchcraft, everything you can imagine. And they have small groups. So after the large group, it's one of the biggest things is we're not there to fix each other. We're just there to fellowship to begin with, and then they break it. My first meeting, after an hour of praise and worship and praying, and a guest speaker and people giving their testimonies, and people coming up and they have 30-day chips, 90-day chips, 6 months chips for whatever they're dealing with. It could be nicotine, like I said, or it could be whatever issue they're dealing with. And it was very encouraging to watch people go up that had been a year free of certain things, or 5 years or 10 years, and to see, and it was precious to see somebody up there that went up for the very first time and picked up their blue chip, which was just that they were going to give that hurt, habit, or hang up over to God. And that was the day they were going to start, And so it was very amazing, very emotional. So then they break in most churches and Celebrate Recovery groups, they break off into small groups, and men and women are completely separate. So there'd be a woman's sexual addiction group, or there'd be a woman's addiction group, or whatever, eating disorder group. Same thing for men, like men of integrity, or men that were a group that was trying to overcome lust or pornography or things like that. And then same thing, different whatever they were struggling with, there's a group for it. And so start off in that group, the small groups once a week after the praise and worship part of it. And then I got into the more serious part of it, which is called a 12-step program. And that 12-step program, it's really, and I've got a note, so forgive me for looking away, but it's like unparalleled value of accountability and discipleship that you get in that. You have, usually it's limited to about 12 people. In my case, a group of 12 men that we meet on Sunday nights. And the amount of love, accepting each other for where you're at in life, it's just like you see on TV, kind of, there's we sit around, hi, my name's Tony. Everybody's like, hi, Tony. And I'm like, yep, I'm struggling with lust and codependency and anger issues, and everybody claps, and so it's, and then we kind of go around, and then within the step study, there's about 26 chapters, I believe, 28 chapters in the book. And it's a week by week program, a week by week study. And so anyway, but through that, and even through that and before that, I had actually been set free. Though I spent pretty much my whole life from probably from a very young child up until, starting as a young child, led up to a lot of things that I didn't even realize till I was about 15 or so. And then at 15, there were things that I found out that, made me question. I didn't trust people like I should. Just create a lot of issues and hurt. And I never dealt with that as a child. And so I took past childhood stuff, brought into my adult life, and without knowing how to deal with it, not really wanting to talk about stuff. And then, so it wasn't until CR, that I was crying out. I'm like, Lord, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be, my life's, what I learned in CR is my life had become unmanageable, and I can't do it on my own, so I'm like, Lord, I want to grow deeper. I want to understand, but I've got these burdens, and I hadn't learned anything about how to deal with burdens yet. I was just crying out to God, God, please take away this pain. I know what your word says, but so I was crying out and with tears in my eyes, crying out to God, driving down the highway. And then all of a sudden, those tears of sorrow turned to tears of joy. And that burden, I never realized that I had a burden. I'd heard the terms burden before, but I didn't realize what that burden felt like until it was taken away. And when he took away that, it was like I was light as a feather, and the tears of sorrow turned to tears of joy. And it was just, it was something I'd never experienced in my life. And he met me where I was at, in my vehicle, driving, delivering coffee to hotels and restaurants and nursing homes. He set me free. And then what I realized later that day is that I was bound in chains. And I heard songs about that, but those chains fell off, and there's one thing to have a burden lifted. You can have a burden lifted and still be in bondage, but to be the burden lifted in your spirit where you feel good. But on top of that, my chains, I was set free. Two distinct things that happened at once. And one could have happened without the other, but I was no longer in bondage. And so the rest of the day, amazing. Got home, looked in the mirror, didn't recognize myself. And that's been about 6 months ago, so 6 months ago or so, so, and then through that, I said, I just started the step group, then through that, it was God's perfect timing, because then I was able to have the resources I needed through that 12 step, because I said, it's a step by step. It's writing down things that you need to deal with. It's a lot of journaling. It's a lot of, how did your day go today? And a lot of discovering about yourself of, okay, this is why I deal with this a certain way. This is why this, and this is what the word says about it. This is, about, and I've got some Bible verses I wanted to give, but it gives you the tools to realize, okay, I'm on a journey here. I've been set free, but I don't want to ever go back to that bondage. I never want to put myself back in those chains. So anyway, so CR has given me those tools, to stay free and to have that joy and to have that peace.
Yes, it's amazing. And oh, for those of you who are watching this and actually know my brother, you know how true that statement really is. This is a different man that we're looking at today than a man from a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So of those verses, Tony, tell us what verses do you have to share with us that are very meaningful for you right now?
Okay, well, I've never been super good. I'm in the process of memorizing scripture, and I'm just not very good at memorizing. So I wrote them down, but I do, so I would have the verse here with it. But the first one is 2 Timothy 1:7, and it's, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind.
Yeah.
And having that sound mind is so important. So anyway, that's 2 Timothy 1:7. Next, Isaiah 26:3 and 4. This is my go-to verse, and it has been for a couple years. Thou will give him perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusts in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. So that's where the strength comes from. You have the peace, the sound mind, the strength. And then Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And I'm paraphrasing some of that.
That's okay. We
Yeah,
all know that one, don't we?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. And then last one, Romans 8:28. And now we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and that are called according to his purposes. And those are my go-to on a daily basis.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for taking the time tonight and
very welcome.
sharing all of that with us.
Yeah.
I think it should just speak to anyone, not just the men watching, that we can overcome the anxieties and the fears and the frustrations that we're having. And as your verses pointed out, it's the only way we do that is when we focus on the Lord and we turn our attention from the news and all of the negative stuff that bombards us on a daily basis, and we just focus our attention on the Lord, and that really does renew our mind and give us a whole new perspective and a whole new way of looking at our entire lives, but also situations like we're all going through right now. So I'm so excited for the changes that I've seen in you, and I know the Lord is not done yet. And I can't wait to hear more good things from you in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, sister. I love you. And tell your wonderful husband hi for me.
He's right there.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And your kitty cat. I don't know where the cat went. I think he kept opening and shutting the door a while ago.
Well, there's three. There are three cats, and yes, they've been running around my feet here and running in and out of the rooms. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. For those that don't know me, I am camera shy, even when it's not live. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, sis. I appreciate you so much. Love you more than you can imagine. So thank you, and have a great night.
All right, love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah.